Hello, sorry I couldn't partake live, but we have some important news coming into our family this week. So I thought that still from the distance of the screen, I would still try to give you a good blanket overview of free from food and the sectors, so that when you go to Barcelona this June, you will already be prepared with some ideas about how your company can position itself, perhaps which partners or which kind of clients you should look for and in which markets. My name is David and I'm a senior analyst of food at Euromonitor International, and I've been asked to talk to you about both lactose-free and gluten-free food today, since I know some of you are more to the dairy sector and some of you might be more to the gluten-free side. So I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to give you a good overview in either case. Today I've structured the presentation in such a way that after these two parts of free from gluten and free from lactose, we're also going to be able to look ahead a little bit to see how we imagine the growth globally is going to be divided on different regions and countries, courtesy of our analytics team. Euromonitor International, my organization, is a leading provider of strategic market intelligence with over 20 years in the business. With more than 1,000 employees and freelancers, we cover 80 markets with consumer data, consumer market data, as well as socio-demographic developments, both in review period and forecasted, as I said, thanks to our analytics team. And on top of this, we also offer consulting services, also geared toward the market information that is necessary before you make your investment, before you make your decisions about where and in what ways to sell what. Before we start, I just want you to see this map view of the world which describes where people have money. I've chosen to represent this by the median disposable income per household, and in 2016 the world still looks in a way that Western Europe, North America and Australia is where people have the most money. So let's see how that affects the market sizes for free from gluten. Well, you see that free from gluten is mainly eaten. You can see it in the regional comparison on the right. That it's still mostly consumed in North America, Western Europe and partly also Australasia. And the market globally is worth about $3.5 billion US. In lactose-free market, we can still see the effect of people having money to spend on health, which of course is coming a little bit later than basic food in Maslow's pyramid of needs. But you can also see a significant consumption in South America and in Asia. Australasia is not the third region in free from lactose market. And the global market size for that reason is larger at $7.5 billion US. Now, we will have an opportunity to speak more about lactose-free food later. Let's start with gluten-free. Included in our definitions are products which naturally would contain gluten, but somehow have been modified either by replacing ingredients or somehow cleaning or processing the ingredients to make it gluten-free. And also it should be labeled gluten-free. Yeah? But we wouldn't include something that's labeled gluten-free if it was never included in the ingredients list in the first place. So take for example this mango, apple, banana baby food, which probably never had gluten-free in it. If somebody would write gluten-free on it, we wouldn't include that. Unfortunately for the Nordic markets, we also don't include frozen baked goods and mixers which you use to make your own gluten-free bread at home. When you go to Barcelona, there are a few things that are going to be striking for you right away, in case you haven't been to free from food previously. The first thing is there's going to be a lot of Italians there, because it's one of the key markets, and I would say it's one of the markets where you have the most small companies interested in this niche. You're also probably going to meet a few people from the UK, after the US as the biggest market, you find UK in the second place and Italy in the third. Note also in this overview of Europe that Russia is in the third, is with 3%, one of the key markets as well. But if we go to a per capita view, we see that Russia is not even in this list. So due to its sheer market size only, it is a key market. And we can assume that these consumers are located mostly in St. Petersburg, Moscow. Otherwise, it's Finland, who has the highest per capita consumption in the world, followed by some Anglo-Saxon markets like New Zealand, Australia, United Kingdom. We can also see that Denmark and Sweden are quite far behind their neighbors due to a more natural understanding of health. And finally, I also want to point your attention to the United States, which I just said is the largest market, has so much potential to fulfill. If it could raise its per capita consumption to the level of Finland, it would have a huge impact on the total global market size of free from gluten. When we look at the markets, there are basically 3 companies in gluten-free foods. It's Pinnacle Foods in North America, it's Dr. Share in Western Europe, and it's Hero Group in Eastern Europe and the Nordics. Let's go back, yeah? We go back to Pinnacle Foods, North America, Western Europe, Eastern Europe. There's basically no overlap between these companies, and it's so clear they really seem to be avoiding each other, yeah? And if we look at how the development is going, this seems to be a successful strategy, because both Pinnacle Foods and Dr. Share are seeing good growth rates, although Hero Group, because of the developments in Russia, is being held back by that. And then you have some other brands following at 4th and 5th place. If we go down to a market view, you can see the same picture. So in the United States, you have Pinnacle. In Russia, you have Hero. In Italy, you have Dr. Share. And then I've included one 4th example, which is more what you would expect from gluten-free markets globally. A picture where you have many players at similar market shares. So in the United Kingdom, you have Dr. Share at only 8%, local Genius Foods at 8%, and a Belgian company at 6%. If you look at the category view instead, you see that we forecast kind of nice growth between 2016 and 2021 for free from gluten food. And the biggest potential we find right there in baked goods. The second thing that is growing in our view, that is pasta, and there is one reason for that, and it's called Barilla. Let me get to that a little bit later. We have some other categories also. I will show you some product examples, what's available in the market. These are also categories that we cover specifically, but they don't have such a big, let's say, penetration in the global view as the other. So starting here with the baked goods, I have chosen 2 very different products in order to show the difference between a young free from gluten market such as the United Arab Emirates and a very mature free from gluten market such as the United Kingdom. Now, in the first place, there are 3 important things that we can notice about this product. Firstly, it's sold frozen, which means that the shelf life can be expanded, which is very handy when you have a few consumers and one week you might sell 2 breads and the other week you might not sell any breads. So it enables you to sell gluten-free products. The other thing we notice is that this is a naan bread, which is heavily consumed in Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, where guest workers come to the United Arab Emirates to work. So probably this product is aimed at somebody who may not have the means to pay for it, unless they're celiac sufferers and it's a traditional meal that they really, really want to have. Then they might go for a gluten-free naan bread. And so what does a person who really seek for this, who really have a diagnosis for celiac disease? Well, they look for something medical. So here you have blue and white, you have a lot of text on it, it's a very medical positioning. And in the other case from the United Kingdom, it's one of the leading bakeries who basically throw out a flat bread on the market. And you can see it's ancient grains, it's high fiber, it's high calcium, it's low saturated fat, and gluten-free is not even noted on the first page of the product. It's somewhere on the back, yeah? Because that's not the point. The point is gluten-free has already been served to the celiac disease sufferers, and they want to expand the group, and this is why we see such growth rates for baked goods, as we see baked goods companies just putting gluten-free abilities on the products that they already have. And this, of course, then shows up in our market sizes. If we go to gluten-free pasta, it's a similar show where Barilla in 2015 launched their gluten-free pasta in the United States. I think it's interesting for two reasons. Firstly, it's a well-known brand, so those that have been going for the medical products previously now can find well-known brands and they feel, yes, I'm just like the other ones. That's one reason why this would be successful. The second one is that it's a low unit price. So those that may stand with conventional Barilla in this hand and gluten-free Barilla in that hand and have heard about this gluten-free thing, well, they might go for the gluten-free Barilla at 50 cents more. So that's another reason why we see growth, why we believe there will be a growth in the coming 5 years for gluten-free pasta. Meanwhile, you have in South Korea a market with lower awareness about gluten-free products, the same kind of positioning, and it did not do very well because it was not targeted specifically to those that really need it, and the general understanding of gluten-free is not such that you just look for it and you just happen to take it if it's significantly more expensive. Another picture from Costa Rica versus the United States. So in the first picture you see sin gluten. And what does that mean? Well, it means no gluten. It's like selling not that. It's like milk would be called not yogurt, right? It doesn't even say cookies on the package because sin gluten is more important than what you're actually getting. That's medical positioning for those that really need it. On the other hand, in the United States it says back to nature. Because that's more important than having it gluten-free, because the product is mass positioned to a lot of people that want adzuki beans, for example. What is adzuki beans? I don't know, but it's in this product and it sounds really cool. In ready meals, I've chosen a product from our own part of the world, from Norway. It's a well-known brand. It's again a low unit price at 5 Norwegian crowns, higher than the normal Grandiosa frozen pizza costs. So it's you know, you might try it. It's not so much extra, and considering that the frozen pizza consumption in Norway is one of the highest in the world per capita, it's not a surprise that this was an extremely successful product. And what I liked about it is that it was actually a direct response to what their consumers were asking for on social media when the company asked, how can we think about launching our next Grandiosa pizza? This is what breakfast cereals used to look like in 1905. It's a very nice commercial, I think. It says, children are happy over their daily bowl of Quaker oats, and every mother knows there is no other cereals that can take its place as a food to build strong boys and girls. Gluten-free boys and girls, yeah? Because Quaker Oats from PepsiCo now is available in the United States, and it's actually been received very well. It's a very simple product. It's just cleaned oats, but because it's sort of in the DNA of companies like General Mills, PepsiCo to do something in really grand scale. They do it in really grand scale, and that means there's a lower unit price. So again, you have the effect that those that haven't tried it before might try it. Those that really need it, they enjoy that it's a standard brand and they can all eat the same in the entire family or in the group of friends. Same with Cheerios, though they had kind of an embarrassing recall as some wheat came into the production process and they had to recall this entire new assortment. This is really embarrassing because there are bloggers who in general are the ones that really need gluten-free food, and they blog about things like technology and safety. Is it safe for me to eat this product? And a thing like this definitely shows up on those pages, and it shows that the company is not reliable, and this mass part of the consumption, those that eat it for a trendy reason or a dietary reason, they also read these blogs. So it matters. It matters what is written on these blogs. And they had to say, you know, sorry, we have this really great product, just don't eat it because it's really dangerous for you. So they had to relabel it and sell it as normal Cheerios. My final example is from Algeria, where we have a baby food, also gluten-free labeled, but the problem here is, again, low awareness of gluten-free, and the positioning of this gluten-free product is that it's gluten-free to avoid allergy. And what I know now, as soon to be a parent, is that companies show us all kinds of things that are supposed to be extra healthy for our children, and we somehow have to choose based on the experience we have and what people around us tell us. So if I wouldn't know about gluten-free and I wouldn't have the perception that this is something extra healthy for my baby, then probably I wouldn't go for this. So Lactalis in this case probably went to the wrong market. Okay, so let's leave the gluten-free food. You know which the biggest players are, you know where it's mostly consumed, you know the difference between a mature and an upcoming market, and you know some of the products that will grow and not do so well in the forecast period. So we move on to free from lactose, which is of course a very Finnish sector. We see firstly that we also think that this is something that has a growth potential in the forecast period. But I've chosen to display this growth together with the growth for other milk alternatives and soy milk. And as you can see, the purple one here, that's lactose-free dairy, so all kinds of dairy. Lactose-free cream, lactose-free cheese. And other milk alternatives and soy milk, that is only the vegetable replacement for drinking milk. And still each of those are approximately larger than lactose-free dairy. So it's important here, my main message with this part will be that it's important to know which really are the competitors for a lactose-free offering. Lactose intolerance is a condition that affects about 75% of the world population, with ethnicity as the determining factor. It sets in during adulthood, and it's not an allergy. That means that those that are intolerant to lactose still can tolerate a little bit, meaning that it might be useful not only to market lactose-free product, but also low in lactose products. In fact, there is a EU health claim that you can use on products which says live cultures in yogurt and fermented milk improve lactose digestion of the product in individuals who have difficulty digesting lactose. That's something that actually can be put on top of products, and it means that the EU says that fermenting products actually makes it easier to digest than a pure drinking milk. And also we should note that live bacteria culture, such as probiotic yogurt, is also a competitor for lactose-free products, and also lactase enzyme pills, where you chemically add the enzyme which breaks down lactose, which your body cannot produce. So, in summary of that, we have one approach to lactose-free, which is simply informing consumers about low lactose content in cheese, in fermented milk. This is Lifeway Kefir. Take a look at that bottle. I'm going to speak about it specifically later. You can also market a free from dairy alternative or a probiotic dairy, saying that this is easier to break down for somebody who has difficulty digesting lactose. You can, in the markets with high per capita consumption, such as Sweden and Finland, you can add value to raise the unit price by saying it's not only lactose-free, but it's also sustainable. You have organic lactose-free milk. And finally, in these markets, it's important to think about how you expand the assortment to attract a wider target group. And I've chosen the anti-example here. American market leader Johnson & Johnson's main brand, Lactaid. Like we need help. Who wants to feel like being the one who needs help? Yeah? I think it's a terrible brand name. Lactose-free dairy is set to see good growth throughout the region, but the biggest markets, like we discussed earlier, is Western Europe, North America, South America, and Australasia. And what I think is interesting here is that there is a big unrealized potential, especially in Africa, in parts of the Asian islands, in parts of South America, because we know that Caucasians in North America, Western Europe, and Australasia are significantly less likely to have lactose intolerance than all the ones who eat less lactose-free milk in the world. Yeah? And at the same time, we know that milk is good, it keeps concentration in schools and so on. So how can we fill that gap? I think that's the big question that we want to be answering that we want to find the answer to within the next 10 years if we're in this business. If we look at the consumption per capita, so Finland is the outstanding leader here, thanks to Valio. And then follows Sweden, Norway, the neighbors. You have United States far down there on the right, even though it's one of the biggest markets in the world. Latin America is coming very strong with Mexico and Spain in the lead there, and China is a key market, but only due to its sheer size. So the same argument can be made as for Russia, that these products probably do not have a very good penetration of the dairy shelves throughout the country. Performance of the top 5 free from lactose companies globally show a similar picture, where we have a Chinese leader, followed by Abbott Laboratories, which is a UK brand, followed by an American brand, followed by a Finnish brand, and finally we have Lactalis Group, who are growing nicely in line with the Chinese from a lower level. And if we go to the overview of the straight market, we see a similar view as we saw in free from lactose, where we have very strong players in the lead for many of these key markets that were very early when introducing these products. You have Finland, for example, Valio at 67%. You have China with Inner Mongolia Yili Industrial Group at 71%. You have Johnson & Johnson in the States at 49%. And in Mexico, you have 2 very strong players, which together have 70% of the market. Now I'm going to take a focus on the biggest market in the world, that is the United States. And I'm going to show you that in the United States, lactose-free is not only what is actually free from lactose. This is the development of that brand I was telling you about, Lifeway Kefir. They have 84 different kefirs in the United States, though it's actually a Eastern European product. I think it's absolutely amazing. I mean, what can you think about? You have low lactose kefir, obviously. Yeah? You have normal kefir. You have Russian kefir, Hungarian kefir, Lithuanian kefir, high protein kefir, low protein kefir, low fat kefir, high fat kefir, colored kefir, flavored kefir, organic kefir, family kefir, on the go kefir. All kinds of things that add up to the $222 million of kefir that they sold in 2016, doubling their market sales from 2011. Otherwise, Johnson & Johnson is the leader with 49% of the market. And it started, this lactate, actually as a brand of lactose enzyme pills in the 1970s. So on the plus side, it's a traditionally established brand. People are very likely to know about this. But look at the other brands that Johnson & Johnson sells, especially Band-Aid, which obviously is a Band-Aid. Band-Aid, Lactate. Who wants to feel like that? What's much more interesting in the United States is the launch that was done through part ownership with Coca-Cola, called Fairlife Milk. Coca-Cola don't call it lactose-free milk, they call it designer milk, and think that this is $1 billion US market in the future. And they jumpstart their sales very nicely in 2015 with $118 million US in sales, thanks much to the distribution network of Coca-Cola, who sees this as a long-term investment. But they did something very stupid in the beginning. They launched this ad. It's a beautiful ad, very technologically advanced. It's colors, but look at the girl up to the right and look what they write on Twitter about it. In case you missed, ads for Coke's new milk brand show nude women covered in milk being weighed. #everyday sexism. And I mean, of course they got this kind of reaction. And yes, they can say it was just a test in Denver and Minneapolis, but since people nowadays have social media, it spread throughout the country, and Fairlife brand was tainted forever. And it didn't have to be like this. Having beautiful girl covered in milk is not wrong, as Valio showed in 2013. Just here it's not the object that is covered in milk, but it's the winner who is made of milk. And for the Plus campaign. Well done. This new Fairlife marketing is much more cozy. You have some innovation, some sustainable farming, slogans like superior nutrition that you can feel good about. One-of-a-kind cold filtration, a technological argument. Sustainable and responsible farming. but it's not organic and it costs more than organic, and who would not think that organic is more sustainable and reliable and responsible? So though it's started well, it's a very wide, it's a brand name that's very general. You can expand it to whatever you want. It's a strong distribution behind it, and it had a unique positioning. It went over to this very not clear kind of positioning, yeah? And the question is, and I think, and the 2016 results, it was a growth for Fairlife, but it was not such a big growth as it could have been. It shows that this newness is wearing off, and that the marketing it lacks edge. It just lacks edge. So that's something to think about, how you go into a market depending on what products are already there and how you position yourself uniquely. Coca-Cola made a beautiful piece of unique positioning, but they just didn't understand it properly and they didn't follow through on it, and that was their big mistake. So I think when we go in with a lactose-free product in some markets, we really have an opportunity to tell the people what lactose-free milk is in the way that we want them to understand it. So we have, just like Valio has shaped the understanding of lactose-free in Finland to be something healthy for everybody, you could do the same in another country as well. Yeah. We move on to milk alternatives, and here we have two categories in Euromonitor international data. It is soy milk and it's other milk, which is everything else, like almond milk. And if we look globally, this is consumed mostly, dominated actually, by Asia Pacific, with China in the lead. At 15.7 billion US dollars per year. It's twice the market size of lactose-free dairy. And if you look at milk alternatives per capita, you have very populous countries like you have Hong Kong, Thailand, you have Taiwan and China, also quite high in per capita consumption. The US is very strong also, with a strong almond harvest in California, while Europe is sort of lacking. And I think it's because we have a traditionally strong dairy sector, we just don't have the need for it. We already know, most of us are not lactose intolerant, so we don't have this need just to replace the dairy. But this might be changing. Has anybody heard about Oatly versus Svensk Mjölk in Sweden? So this happened between 2014 and 2016, where oat-based dairy alternative company got a new marketing. They made it a little bit edgy, just like Fairlife did. It was very good to the beginning. They had slogans like "no soy, no milk, no badness." It's like milk, but for humans. And these arguments were they were not very appreciated by the dairy industry. So Svensk Mjölk, with Arla as a dominating member, chose to sue them to take these claims off the market. But Oatly did something that they didn't quite count on. They took the lawsuit, they went to court, and they made a special website where they published all the court documents. And their marketing was so much focused on how they are David versus Goliath, how the milk lobby is bullying them, how soon they will be silenced forever, but they can still tell you the truth. And the truth is the products are really, really good. This was probably the best thing that could have happened to them. And this dairy industry, they realized their mistake much too late. This is one of their products, and this one in their marketing actually promises you to have dairy, animal-friendly karma if you consume it. So they even turned into a religion to buy Oatly. Okay, but if we look out on milk alternatives globally, you have Chinese brands as number 1 and 3. You have White Wave Foods, an almond company from the United States, at number 2. And then you have Nestle and Vita Soy a little bit further down. And if you go to the countries again, in China you have 32% of Hebei Huangyang Shuishu beverage. In the United States you have White Wave Foods at 42%, Australia, Australasian Conference Association at 29%, and in Taiwan you have Uni-President Enterprises Company at 36%. Now, considering that China is the largest market in the world for, I will say, the largest market potential for lactose-free dairy, it's interesting to know what kind of products a lactose-free potential product in China would be up against. So looking at the milk to the dairy-free milk alternative launches in China in 15 and 14, we have here coconut milk that comes from a soy brand. Yeah, it's 250 milliliters. It's on the go. The other one is 245 milliliter UHT walnut milk and almond milk. Again, UHT and on the go. This is because it's the climate in China with the quality of the milk that they have, with the ways they transport dairy products to the people don't really have refrigerators that are very good. Milk is something that is seen and in many cases does spoil very, very quickly. We're talking less than 24 hours. So UHT is like a hygiene factor, I would say. So this is one thing that you need to know. Another thing might be that you want to keep control of your own manufacturing in China to avoid any kind of plagiarism or similar. But definitely a big opportunity. So we've looked into free from lactose. You know what the competitors are. You have the fermented milk with low lactose content. You have milk alternatives. You have the lactose dairy itself. And you need to make sure that when you go into a market, you have an understanding for all these benchmarks. And when you look at whether your growth in your company was a good growth rate, you have to benchmark it to all three of these sectors to see if that was good. Yeah. So finally, let's finish with an outlook. We see a growth figure of 7% globally for free from gluten. With a lot of new markets coming up. Middle East has some of the biggest growth rates right now. Free from dairy milk alternatives, a little bit lower. It's weighed down by China, which actually has gone into negative territory in constant terms, basically just being driven by inflation. So global figure at 4.4%. And free from lactose dairy, very interesting what's going on in China. Well, the growth at 6% is actually in line with dairy. Last year in Amsterdam at Free From Food, I had to tell everybody that the growth of lactose-free dairy in China is forecasted at a lower rate than total dairy, meaning that the share of lactose in the shelf will diminish over time. And I don't know if it was because of me, but we had to revise our forecast and now it's in line, but still far behind probiotic drinking yogurt at 11% CAGR, so that's annual growth rate. United States rather stagnant at 3% CAGR, even though it's one of the big markets as well. When we look into innovation, so a trend that we can see in gluten-free is a lot of these what we call ancient grains. As a resident of Lithuania, I would like to make a little punch for buckwheat, which is a cheap ingredient with a lot of good health benefits that we already see coming in protein-enhanced versions of granola, gluten-free ones in Sweden in 2016-2017. So very interesting, keep an eye out for buckwheat. Another thing that you should think about when you think about the free from food market is not only the products and the countries, but also how you enter the country. We talked about that there are different kinds of countries, the ones that are upcoming, serving a dietary need, and those that are saturated, wanting to go more for the mass product, those that seek this for a trendy reason or a lifestyle reason, or they want to be unique, something like this. So while grocery retail is still the main food channel, internet retailing, I think, is a great way of entering new markets in many cases. In these new markets, you might also want to go to the last point in the slide, medical institutions, and donate. I think it's especially relevant for gluten-free, actually, that when people get a diagnosis, that they also get a bag of products saying that, yes, you have a diagnosis, but it won't be so bad, just stick to these products. They will try it, they might like it, they might stick to it. And then you can serve them through internet retailing when they already know about your brand, about the product, about the possibility. Then you have hotels, which is coming. Breakfast for Everyone was launched in Sweden in 2015. Food service, well, you have menu labeling here in Finland, which is an initiative that is very much helping gluten-free and lactose-free companies sell into food service when you're creating this demand from the consumers themselves. So this is something that I usually show at these big fairs to say that this is very relevant in the future. Or you can serve institutions. I know Oatly now, Swedish company, is going to try to serve their oat milk alternative for Chinese school children. So let's see how that goes. Yeah, here is a Finnish menu with the labeling. And as a summary, we can take these opportunities and threats with us. I'm not going to read all of them, since Jukka-Pekka is going to be able to give you the slides if you would like them at a later point. But some of these things on the threat side, I would at least like to put some attention to. Firstly, medical advances such as vaccine development. There is Nexvax 2 being developed, which is hoping to become a permanent solution for celiac disease. And if that would be successful, then there wouldn't be any real market for gluten-free food anymore, unless it could be a trendy thing, of course. But then that takes me to the other threat, that because there is a lot of consumers in markets like Finland, Sweden, United Kingdom, the mature markets, that eat this just because it's trendy, another dietary trend might come along, and this is something to keep in mind before you invest in new lines. Taste and texture, high levels of sugar and fat, that's technological sides of the product. Not everybody likes the texture. And high levels of sugar or fat, well, that sort of happens when you replace the gluten with other things, right? Yeah, but big opportunities also. In lactose-free, we have to think about the major threats. So it's other milk alternatives, especially since this is what's going to see growth. Lactase enzymes, which could be seen as something that is very convenient, although to the benefit of lactose dairy companies is that a pill is definitely positioned as lactaid, but a dairy product might be consumed as something that's nice to have. Baby boom will come in China. The one-child policy has been loosened a little bit, so a baby boom is coming, more Chinese, young Chinese that you can educate about your new products. What else would I like to take up? Well, there's a large untapped medical potential, of course, in Africa, South America, parts of Asian islands. So this is something that is worth looking into because it's a very stable consumer base, if you can just teach them to drink dairy. So, important considerations and strategic choices that you should be scheduling and sketching a little bit about before you go to Barcelona is where to be to choose the markets. This is something that Euromonitor can help you with our worldwide database on these markets. What to offer. This is something that we can help you look into by showing what other companies offer through our new product development slides. How to penetrate the market, well, that's also something that, at least to some part, we can provide some data on. And whom to serve, well, that's more of a consulting service, I think. So whom to serve, I'm thinking, is it mass or is it a unique choice? Because this then affects how you penetrate the market if you go for a grocery channel or an internet channel. Also what you offer, if you position it as primarily the product and then gluten-free, or if you position it as primarily gluten-free and then the product. And also where to be, well, that's connected. Yeah. So that is all for me. I hope this will be a sufficient backdrop for you. I advise you to look at the slides again at a later point. And if you have any questions, you have my contact information right here. And I think that I will be appearing somewhere here quite soon to answer any further questions right now.